out. Two middle-aged guys try to work it all out. Two middle-aged guys try to work it all out. Welcome, everyone, to Two Middle-Aged Guys Trying to Work It All Out. I'm Chris, and I'm here with my good friend,
Dave.
And this is a big one, Dave. I mean,
it is.
At this point, we're recording it. We haven't done the post-production yet. This might be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seasons worth of content.
This could be like a Ken Burns style documentary length.
Yeah, which I think is great. We can't like slowly zoom in on ourselves since it's an audio medium, though. So I don't know how that.
Maybe I could do some narration of my letter that I'm writing to you, my dearest Chris. With what is it, adagio for strings playing in the background?
That's a fantastic idea.
We've come to talk to you today about Twin Peaks. Oh, I gave it away.
Did?
I did.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we always have a little fun with it, but people probably read.
I'm assuming
the podcast description. I
like to think that they're such fans that they're just automatically downloading, they're just not even watching.
They haven't been able to find the skip button, so they have to listen.
It just keeps going.
Oh boy, I'll listen to this.
It's good for you. So thank you, listener, for being out there and not finding the skip button. But yeah, we're talking about Twin Peaks today.
Yes,
and usually we do some quippy banter or a game or something, but not today. I don't think.
It's too big of a topic. It deserves to be just dove right into.
Gosh, well, let's do some diving.
So, Chris, what is Twin Peaks?
Oh my gosh. How much time do you have?
Oh boy. Most of our episodes are an hour in length.
Yeah, that's true. No, so I'm going to give you my short synopsis, my elevator pitch of Twin Peaks. I would say that it is a surreal Lynchian journey into the reflections of the world presented through the lens of small-town USA and a backdrop of a brutal murder.
All right. Well, that is a good elevator pitch.
I worked on that for a long time.
Well, I have an elevator pitch. Mine is written from David Lynch's perspective.
Okay.
It's a little bit longer than yours. I don't say Lynchian as David Lynch. That would be,
Although I'm sure he does.
Third person. I don't know. Do you think he's doing the whole third person Bob Dole reference?
No, but I like
Bob Dole likes Twin Peaks. All the kids love Bob Dole jokes.
Of course.
Finally.
Man, we know our demographic.
Some Gerald Ford jokes coming up, kids. If I was David Lynch and I was trying to describe Twin Peaks, the series, the groundbreaking television series that spanned network TV, a film, books, a Showtime prestige series, this is how I would do it. I'm going to try to get my voice right here. We are going to... Oh, I can't do it. I can't do the... I can't... I wanted to do the David Lynch as Gordon Cole.
Federal Bureau of Investigation, Regional Bureau Chief Gordon Cole. That's a real mouthful, but I can't hear myself anyway.
I just don't have it, and I'm just going to apologize. Just imagine a monotone voice yelling this at you. We are going to create a story, a mystery. Who brutally killed the most popular, perfect prom queen girl in a small town? But really, the mystery is just a frame on which to hang an incredible world with unique and endearing characters. The small Washington state village of Twin Peaks, the landscape, forest and mountains and rivers and lakes, and people. You will love the people. Noble, odd, often scary, and always unusually sincere. They will drive the show. And the more you love these people, these characters, the more I will hurt them. And by hurting them, I will hurt you, viewer, and you will keep coming back for more, and I will keep hurting them, and it will become a classic.
He's got a lot of insight into the future.
He does.
Into what happened.
It is almost sort of like he's an omniscient narrator of his own show.
That's amazing.
Of his own work. Yeah. But yes.
I think either of those elevator pitches would fit perfectly in the universe.
We hit the same beats, right? Mine was a little bit more bitter. And the bitterness, I think it betrays a love for the source material, but some frustrations I had with it as you walk through the journey of the Twin Peaks fan. So
okay, well, that'll be interesting to hear, and as we get through it, I'll be interested to hear what your complaints are, what the things that affected you how, like Lucas, David Lynch ruined your childhood. I'm looking forward to all that discussion.
Well, David Lynch did ruin my childhood by exposing me to Blue Velvet and Wild at Heart.
Did he come over to your house?
He did.
And
He
say,
did.
We're watching these films.
No, fine. I did it to myself.
No, I mean, that's a great transition because I think one thing that we should cover in this topic is how we were introduced to Twin Peaks.
Yes.
Because that was kind of unique. We were both a little too young to catch it in its initial run.
Yep.
So why don't you tell me the story of how you remember we connected with the Twin Peaks universe?
So we were familiar with Lynch by way of, as mentioned, Blue Velvet. Wild at Heart, oh boy. Not a movie that you should watch with your kids.
Or
Wild at Heart.
all.
Or at all. Or with elderly people. Don't invite the pastor and his wife over for a dinner party. Then what are you going to watch? Oh, we're going to watch Wild at Heart. No, don't do that. Eraserhead. So we were familiar with the world of Lynch and enjoyed it. And then I recall us getting into Twin Peaks from the reruns that were played just a couple years after its mainline run on ABC on Bravo. And it was like every night or every other night or a couple times a week. I don't remember. They would play it in order. And we picked up on it. And I don't remember if we got into it at the start or at the middle or exactly how it worked, but somehow we saw it all the way through, no gaps, and were mesmerized by this show that was unlike anything that was on TV at the time. Is that how you remember?
Prior to the Bravo run, I remember Hastings having the pilot available for rent.
Oh, okay.
And there was, and we'd go to like Suncoast Movies and you would see the big like VHS set of Twin Peaks. I think that was available before the Bravo airing. And maybe I'm wrong, but I remember seeing that and we were tuned into Lynch, so we knew that Twin Peaks was something Lynch had done.
Right.
From our little Leonard Maltin book or Video Hound or whatever we had. But we had no way to watch it. And, like this giant VHS set probably cost thousands of dollars back in the
Because that was
90s.
that was a novelty, right? The idea that you would buy television shows.
That did not exist.
Right. It was not, it's a common thing.
Yeah, and they
later, but...
like they did it with Star Trek, and I think it was like $1 million per episode with Star Trek.
I remember those cases that
yes.
they came in. They were like little suitcases, hardback.
Yeah.
It was not a typical thing, right?
No. So they had that. They had Star Trek, and then they had this box set of Twin Peaks. I think I'm correct in my timeline. So we knew about it, but we had no access to it. Hastings had the pilot for rent, so I think we had seen the pilot, which is an excellent pilot.
It's a movie.
It very much is.
It's movie quality, and
It very much is. And so we were hungry for it. So I remember when the Bravo broadcast happened that we were there from the jump.
We already had plugged in.
Right, exactly. Yep. And we were aware at least of what the story base was. We were aware of some of the Lynchian moments of Twin Peaks, and we were buckled in for the ride. And
that's entirely possible.
Yeah, and I recorded every episode of the Bravo thing, so we had, from that point on, we had access to it, and we could revisit it however we wanted to. But also of note for that Bravo broadcast is they filmed those interstitial Log Lady intros, which, again, not having access to Twin Peaks, not seeing it on first run, I thought that was just part of it.
Part of the story.
Like, I didn't realize that was added to Twin Peaks until probably until the DVD release of Twin Peaks. But that's just a little bit more detail of how I remember us coming into contact with.
Obviously I didn't remember that, but it seems very plausible. We didn't accidentally rent Firewalk with Me first, did we? Which we'll get into the viewer.
I don't think first.
Listener.
Yeah.
Please don't try to view the podcast. You'll just listen to it.
Yes. I don't think first. I mean, it was accessible.
Yes.
But I think we were smart enough to be like, well, we haven't seen the show.
Yeah.
Boy, that's a good question.
I don't know. Right? It's one of those things where my memory is really fuzzy.
Yeah.
But I know Bravo was that was the central point where we got to consume the whole series.
Yes.
Whether it was how we got into the series or not, I'm thinking we did see the pilot some way first.
I'm almost positive at that point.
And that pilot, oh my goodness, it was movie quality.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the best things I think maybe ever on television. Certainly up to that point, and even still today, even with the prestige shows that we have now on on HBO and Showtime and other channels, it was just outstanding, and it introduced you to this wonderful setting and town and characters, and it
was
immediately grabbed your if you like that sort of thing,
Right.
it grabbed your attention.
Right. And the pilot and the whole show in general is so evocative. Like the way even the credit sequence,
Oh,
the
the
theme
music.
song, right? Exactly.
The trees, but yeah, the music. A little note here. It's just it's a character of its own, and it adds so much atmosphere.
Yeah,
Angelo
absolutely.
Badalamenti.
Badalamenti.
Badalamenti,
I believe
okay,
is the pronunciation. But he passed away recently.
He did.
Yeah,
He did.
so.
Yes.
So I mean, how do you want to tackle this topic? I mean, we talked about the pilot. Do we want to just do like broad conversations of season 1?
I guess maybe we should say if you haven't watched Twin Peaks, listener, we're going to spoil it. We have to. You can't have a meaningful discussion without giving away the secrets and the revelation in the show and talking about the characters. So I guess I would just caution you, if you haven't experienced it, pause this episode, spend the next 4 days just consuming every episode of Twin Peaks and, taking, drinking monsters and popping caffeine pills, and then come back and finish this episode up.
That's not bad advice, but I would almost submit that it's not spoilable. I mean, like, even if you know...
Because the interpretation...
even if you know what happens and the quote-unquote solution to the mystery, I don't know that changes the experience all that much.
Yeah, there's some truth to that, and also the show being so visual. We can't talk about that and describe that in a way that would do it any justice whatsoever. It really does need to be experienced. So
enjoy it however you want.
Yeah, enjoy it however you want. But and there's so many people who do Twin Peaks content. You've seen it on the YouTube videos and the podcast, and I'm not going to try to be anything like that. This is more just an earnest discussion of this show. Why is it so important? Why is it so beloved, right, by fans? Why did it become a cult thing?
Oh, now that's interesting. And if you'll allow me a segue before we get into talking about
you want to write
season,
a segue? The T-Max Studios is very small, Chris.
Listen, I don't walk anywhere, okay?
And we had to install a people mover for you to get into T-Max Studios.
I don't understand why this
Very
is a surprise. Anyway, if you'll allow me a segue, spelled differently.
Spelled Sigu.
Yes, exactly. That was one of the questions that I had when I was preparing my show notes for this. Why do you think this was such a hit? I mean, for people like us who are into the work of David Lynch, I think that obviously it ticks all the boxes for a David Lynch fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Why don't we come back around that at the end? Because I think that we might learn some things through this discussion that might help us answer this question.
Fair enough.
Because it's a great question, and I'm not sure I'm equipped to answer it.
I'm not sure I am either, but we're going to try because that's what we do in this podcast.
That's right. We figure it out.
We figure it out. So
we work it out.
We do both.
We do. I guess we do both.
We
but
work
the
it out.
title is,
Oh, that's right.
we got to stick with the brand.
Fair enough. So Twin Peaks season 1.
As we talked about in our elevator pitch, the central mystery is who killed this perfect prom queen, most popular girl in high school, who you quickly find out is not perfect. It's an extremely dark side, and then you realize this whole town's got a dark hedge around it that is it's suffocating the people there, in a lot of negative energy, and the Black Lodge is is the kind of a manifestation of that, along with the bad guy Bob, who I think doesn't he appear at the end of the second episode, or does he appear at the end of the pilot?
I think he appears at the end of the pilot.
He's kind of crouching behind some furniture.
There is that scene, yes, which I'm almost positive is in the pilot. But there was also the extended pilot, which I don't even know if you want to cover that.
But I know that existed. I'm sure we saw it.
Oh yeah,
but I can't recall.
I mean, the difference is it tacks on like a half hour and it wraps up the whole thing.
Oh.
Yeah, it's very bizarre, and I don't actually recommend watching it as part of the series. But the intention was, if the pilot doesn't take off to show, then they were going to release it as a film. And you were going to get the solution to the murder at the end of the movie. And it is it's different and it's the same as the solution in the show, which there's some filming things going on there.
I remember this now, but I remember it didn't tie into the broader world, so we didn't,
it
didn't
doesn't
put much stock in it.
No, the extended pilot does not fit into the timeline of Twin Peaks in any way, shape, or form.
The first thing I have about that pilot is that opening credit scene with the music that we talked about. It sets the tone, and you're like, "Oh, this is something different." The production is of a higher quality. The music kind of lulls you into, I don't know. It's hypnotic. It's not exciting. It is. It's got a very unusual texture to it.
One of the things that always struck me about it is it breathes. It gives you space, right? And especially television, it's typically so quick. It's like, we got to get to the next thing because we're afraid you're going to change that channel, or we got to get to the next thing because we got an ad break coming on. And immediately Twin Peaks is saying, that's not what this is. Right. We're not doing that. And the music, which you've talked about, but then also the shots of just the steel mill.
Yep.
Working and these machines just going up and down rhythmically. It's quite remarkable. And if you're not even going to watch the show, just bring up the credit sequence on YouTube because it's worth watching. Yeah. It's amazing.
You're like, this is from the early 90s. This was on network TV. Not that it was shocking. In fact, if anything, it was it sort of betrayed the darkness that was going to come in the show.
Which is a very Lynch thing to do.
Sure, yes.
And kind of that seedy underbelly against the polish.
The 1950s perfect sort of family life, nuclear family.
Exactly. I mean, that's
it's Blue Velvet, right? He experimented with that in Blue Velvet.
Yeah, I think he really kind of experimented in everything he's ever done. It's always there. And Twin Peaks is no different in that regard. I think I would argue that Twin Peaks is maybe the culmination of him playing with that idea. Like, I think he does it more successfully in Twin Peaks than any of his films. But that might just be because he had a larger canvas to paint with. It's one of those credit sequences that makes me mad that any streaming service ever has a skip credit sequence button.
Right.
Because it's like, you need to watch
to watch that, yeah. Now, most credit sequences are not good like that, right? Or they try to be clever. And,
right.
And we've talked about opening themes that are innovative, like Gilligan's Island and the like. But this one is just, it sets a mood. That music is beautiful. And then it quickly goes into, they found a body, and the mystery is established, who killed Laura Palmer. And then you're introduced to one of the greatest characters in all of television. Maybe really my favorite, right? Just love special agent, pardon me. Not just agent, but special agent, Dale Cooper.
Diane, 11:30 a.m., February 24th. Entering the town of Twin Peaks. It's 5 miles south of the Canadian border, 12 miles west of the state line. I've never seen so many trees in my life. As W.C. Fields would say, I'd rather be here than Philadelphia. 54 degrees on a slightly overcast day. The weatherman said rain. You could get paid that kind of money for being wrong 60% of the time. You'd be working. Mileage is 79,345. Gauge is on reserve. Riding on fumes here. I got to tank up when I get into town. Remind me to tell you how much that is. Lunch was $6.31 at the Lamplighter Inn. That's on Highway 2 near Lewis Fork. That was tuna fish sandwich on whole wheat, slice of cherry pie, and a cup of coffee. Damn good food. Diane, if you ever get up this way, that cherry pie is worth a stop.
A man who loves coffee and he loves pie, and is just played by Kyle MacLachlan, wonderful actor.
Yep.
Great character. You fall in love with him immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. There's and to be introduced to him as he's driving in a car and he's got his little tape recorder,
yeah.
and he's recording to Diane, who through the original run of the show, you do not meet. She's just this ambiguous voice or she's not even a voice. She's this ambiguous ear on a tape recorder that Dale Cooper is talking to. And the dialogue, it's so unique. I almost use the word bizarre, but I think that's overstating it. But it's just, here is this agent that's obviously traveling to investigate this murder, which is this incredible thing, and he's dictating to this tape recorder about what he had for lunch, and how good the tuna fish sandwich was that he ate. And it's just, it immediately gives you that juxtaposition of this serious setup with a sometimes very comedic tone, but that's not even the whole picture.
But played straight. Right?
Yes,
it's not jokey. Right?
Exactly right.
It's just,
right.
I'm a special agent. I'm leaving my notes. These are going to be transcribed. This is what I had for lunch. Let me tell you about the quality of the coffee and the accommodations here at the lodge, etc. Right.
Right.
But you fall in love with him immediately. And if you don't, the show's probably not for you, right? And I don't mean that like an insulting sort of way, but he is the driving force behind the show, and it all kind of comes with him as he moves through the story. And caring about him is necessary to care about the rest of the world, and I think to move the story forward. Thankfully, it's so well done, so well acted, written, that it's easy.
Yeah.
To identify with him, to root for him, to feel like he's genuinely good as that first season moves along and he rescues some characters from a bad, like a human trafficking type situation. We no one was using those terms then, but now we look at it like, oh my gosh, super dark.
Yes.
Which that's Twin Peaks, super dark. Could have been the subtitle. But yeah, so he's a special agent. He's come to investigate the murder of Laura Palmer, and then the rest of the town he meets them. It's Sheriff Harry S. Truman, a sheriff with a little bit in over his head, but a nice guy, and the relationship between he and Cooper becomes a central part of the show. You start to learn about the background of the town and the drama that's going on. You spend a lot of time in a diner where much coffee and pie is consumed. The show just sort of takes off from there, and you become very comfortable in even like the mundane things, right? Sitting around the diner and talking about, that's a good piece of pie, and then like, give me a whole episode where they just talk about desserts, and you like the characters and the interaction so much that sure, the mystery's great, but you just kind of like hanging out with them.
Yeah, and that the mystery was never intended to be solved, and like anybody,
it's an excuse to hang this world on.
Exactly, and anybody who knows anything about Twin Peaks, they know that story. That Lynch and Mark Frost, who was the other writer on the show, and I'm sorry we haven't mentioned his name at 20-some minutes into the podcast.
Right, Mark Frost, yep.
Because he deserves to be mentioned. He's
very important.
He is very important. Mark Frost and David Lynch co-created Twin Peaks, co-wrote a ton of it together as well. So very important. But Lynch and Frost never intended the murder to be solved. And it was the networks that said, you've got to solve this thing. Yep. And really, they said it very early in the lifetime of Twin Peaks. So it makes me wonder what we would have got if Lynch and Frost had been left alone. But also, to the point that I'm making now, is the murder is the setup, but it doesn't matter. Like, that's not the point of the show. That was just the foil to start investigating all of these different people's lives. That was the foil to get Agent Cooper into this story, to have him not even really be a surrogate for the audience, because he's way smarter than we are in these terms. But he is kind of the guide to the show, that he takes us through it.
So an analog to him would be like Sherlock Holmes, right?
Yes.
In terms of his ability, his detective skills, and his ability to use intuition to move through situations,
and supernatural. I mean, he's really open to like other methods of thinking. Like when he throws rocks at a bottle. Yes. And when he's thinking about the name that is the suspect, when the bottle breaks, he hits it with a rock. That's his suspect.
Very weird.
Yeah, just stuff like that is all throughout every episode of Twin Peaks.
It's woven in, and it's taken seriously by Cooper. And because of the respect that the other characters have for him, they take it seriously as well, even against sort of their better judgment. Particularly like Sheriff Truman, who's pretty skeptical of that sort of thing, but he becomes a believer because of, like the audience falls in love with Dale Cooper, the other characters do as well, and they consider him, as the show goes on, part of the community.
They do, and there is that transition, but there's never opposition. Like a lesser show would have taken this and turned it into like a fish out of water story.
Right, like a Northern Exposure.
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
which
yeah.
was very compared to Twin Peaks when it aired, which I
yes.
never understood.
Right.
But any lesser show would have gone that direction, and Twin Peaks does not. It does introduce the character of Dale Cooper to the rest of the characters, but there's never this just like, oh well, this city slicker is here to tell. It's none of that. None of that in the show.
He buys salsa that's made in New York City. Confident of that.
And they run him out of town.
Yes. No, it's not the fish out of water. In fact, it sort of subverts your expectations by making him, accepted in the community. And, but you're right about the mystery is not terribly important. And this is where I'll say Laura Palmer is not my favorite character. In fact, she may be my least favorite character. That and another character I might mention later. She's incredibly difficult to like. She is a victim in multiple ways throughout the story, but still, she, her bad judgment and just awfulness, makes it really hard to like her. And I was trying to figure out, is that on purpose? Was it because I even think Sheryl Lee's acting isn't all that great. Was that intentional?
I would argue against the acting not being all that great.
Okay.
I think she's phenomenal. But I will agree with you that she's not very sympathetic until you get to Firewalk with Me and Twin Peaks: The Return. And then I think she becomes very sympathetic. But let's keep the conversation to season 1. So in season 1, you're right. And I think it is intentional to, again, play with that expectation of, oh, this is the prom queen, this is the most popular girl in school, but she turns out to have so many vices, so many problems, so many issues going on with her life that, it's chipping away at that perceived perfection. Which Lynch likes to do so much in all of his work. So I think that aspect of it was very intentional. There's not a lot of redemption to be seen in season 1 or season 2 of Twin Peaks. And I think that comes later in the story.
I think we're supposed to think that, but I've always had a hard time with it.
Even in Firewalk with Me, like you don't have any sympathy for Laura Palmer?
Sympathy, yes.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean I like the character.
Oh, that's fair.
I don't know if she redeemed herself. We can talk about that when we get into Firewalk with Me, because that's its own difficult beast. But yes, you go through that first season. You have a bad guy, and we mentioned Bob. Mm-hmm. Now, is it true? I think that it is. I think I've heard Lynch talk about this, that the character of Bob, who's this bad guy, this entity, who's played by a guy in a jean jacket and jeans, or the Canadian tuxedo, that he came up with the idea of, he was a crew member who was like crouching on the set, and it frightened some people. It's like, oh, I'm going to put him in the show. Is that true, or is that just an urban legend that's grown up around Twin Peaks?
That's what I've always heard. I don't think I've necessarily heard it from Lynch's lips. I know I have seen some kind of interview footage somewhere where somebody was talking about that. I don't remember if it was the actor that played Bob, maybe, or Mark Frost, maybe, but that's what I believe. That's what I've always heard.
Interesting. Well, he's such a creepy, scary, maniacal, evil-looking
right, and
dude.
And so much of David Lynch's work is not impromptu, but like he makes himself very open to these happenstances.
Yes.
And when he sees them, they seem to excite him, and he really likes to do that. So the idea of, oh, we know we need a bad guy, but we haven't figured that out yet. It doesn't matter that we're in production of the show, and we'll figure it out.
That would not fly in most television shows.
No.
I would hope it wouldn't.
No, it wouldn't. No, but somehow Lynch has made a career out of it.
Right.
So.
Well, he's a unique
Yes.
talent, a unique individual.
Yes, he is.
But it's such a scary bad guy. And then, he's not the only bad guy, right? You have the whole lodge concept, the Black Lodge and the White Lodge, and it's a really interesting place for folks that maybe aren't as familiar with the show. If you've ever seen anything of Twin Peaks related where you see a black and white checkered floor and red curtains around, you're inside the Black Lodge at that point. So it's just a unique and interesting setting. and it's another world, another dimension. They don't completely ever fully explain it,
and they never will.
Yeah. But so as the season 1 goes on, you're introduced to potential suspects, bad guys for who kills Laura, and they're all pretty despicable. Laura had a couple of boyfriends. She had the James Dean crying, motorcycle riding, pompadour wearing boyfriend named James.
Name's James, yeah.
And you pretty quickly it's not him. And then you had Bobby, who might be him. Mike and Bobby, right? You think, okay, he's a bad guy.
Bobby and Mike are the punks of the high school.
The punks of the
yes. Yeah, so and they're set up that way very quickly, and their whereabouts at the time of the murder are quickly brought into question.
And they're selling drugs.
Yeah.
And then there's the trucker whose name
Leo.
Leo, thank you. Who's a drug smuggler and sort of the upstream guy who gets the drugs to down to the foot soldiers like Bobby and Mike.
And you find that he's got a bloody shirt that he's hiding from people very early in the show, and
and he has a gross Canadian friend who Jacques, who also is a suspect. He's a human trafficker too. Kind of makes me uncomfortable saying that, right? It's a little real now in the world.
I'm not sure if we're selling the show or if it's
don't watch this awful soul stealing. So you get this crazy cast of characters that might be the killer, and they're all bad, and they all deserve scrutiny. But then you find out who the killer really is, and it's way more dark and messed up than any of those folks. This evil Bob dude in his Canadian tuxedo is a spirit, an evil entity that takes over. Should we just say it? I guess.
I guess so.
Laura's dad and
Laura's father was
played by the great Ray Wise.
Yeah, who is fantastic.
Yes,
and
Leland Palmer.
Have you heard him talk about that reveal?
No.
Oh, there's a clip on YouTube, and it's really interesting because at the onset of the show, since Lynch and Frost never intended to reveal who killed Laura Palmer, they didn't know who killed Laura Palmer, and the whole thing was just, let's make all of these people suspicious, and then let's investigate how that plays out. So when their hand was forced to reveal the killer, there was a lot of back and forth and trying to decide, what makes most sense, what is artistically satisfying, and what also works in the context of the show. And when they happened upon, it's going to be Laura's dad, they told Ray Wise. And the way he tells the story, he had just become a father himself, and he was like, I am not comfortable with this.
Yeah.
Like that does not sit well with me. And he talks about how, he and Lynch had very lengthy conversations about it. And it was this idea of Bob being that spiritual entity that then Ray Wise could be like, okay, well, it's not.
I'm just demon possessed.
Exactly, right.
Oh, boy.
And that was enough for him as an actor to say, okay, let's go for this.
Yeah.
Which, fine, great. I'm glad that it worked out for everybody. But I cannot imagine how he dealt with Firewalk with Me.
Oh, I know. I was thinking about that. Oh, that's...
But anyway, so it's Laura's dad,
Yeah.
and that's who is the killer as far as the show goes.
So the mystery solved, show's over forever
For a ton of people. I mean, the show lost so much viewership after that, and to be fair, the show floundered after.
It did, right? So that season 1 is really peak Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
That's not to say that season 2's not got a lot of merit.
Right.
I would describe in my notes here I've written down that season 2 has high highs and low lows. What's really good is great, and what's poor is pretty poor. So when it comes back, Cooper is a little bit on the outs with the FBI because of some of his behavior. He crossed over into the Canadian border on a do-gooding mission. Another reason why you love Cooper is because he did what was right to save Audrey Horne from the whole trafficking issue. We haven't even gotten to the Horns, but they're the bad rich family.
Yeah, that they own the hotel.
They own the hotel, they conspire or are in conflict with. It goes back and forth with another rich family, the Martells, right? Mm-hmm. And there's some drama there, and it's fine. It gets a little ridiculous at times, but their daughter Audrey, who's played by Sherilyn Finn, is in love with Dale Cooper, infatuated, I guess you should say. And when he saves her, it just goes into overdrive. because he's the hero and he's just a. But Dale Cooper being honorable is like, you're a high school student, you're 18, go find someone your own age, and just such a great character. Yeah. So that season 2 is a much longer season. What is it? Is it 16
it's
episodes?
No, I think it's a full 26.
20. Okay, so and it deals with the after effects of the solving the Laura's mystery and what that implies for the community. It brings in new characters, including the David Lynch, the director, as Agent Cooper's boss. Assistant director Gordon Cole. He was not in the first season, was he?
I think he was.
Wow, really?
I really think
man.
he was.
Maybe like on the phone or something.
No, I think he shows up.
Okay, all right. Well, he became a very big part of the second season.
Yes, he did.
The hard of hearing Gordon Cole, who always yells unless he's talking to...
No, you're right. First appeared in season 2.
I thought he was on the phone at one point.
Maybe. But I was thinking that there was a scene where he shows up just briefly at the sheriff's station, but that obviously that is season 2.
So his character's great and helps move the story along. It introduces Dale Cooper's main adversary, Wyndham Earl,
yep.
a former FBI agent in the Blue Rose Task Force. They called it Blue Rose in season 2, right? That's not a later invention. Maybe it is.
I don't think the Blue Rose thing came about until Fire Walk with Me.
Fire Walk with Me, okay. But he, kind of gives he's kind of a silly character. He's got some good points and some silly points, but he gives Dale Cooper someone to match wits with.
And I would say that season 2 really didn't get its footing until they introduced Wyndham Earl. Because I think that the fallout of the whole Laura Palmer thing, there were a couple episodes where it really felt like, gosh, we don't know what to do anymore. Right. And then they kind of brought it together. But it also bears mentioning that after the murder was solved, Lynch ducked out. Like, he was like, I got to go do Wild at Heart. Yeah. Actually, that was the film he was doing. It was. And he stopped like working on the scripts of it. He stopped directing it. And even though he came back as Gordon Cole, he did not direct another episode of Twin Peaks until the finale of this.
Really? Okay. I knew it was towards the later part. I didn't realize it was just the finale. But yeah, no, his involvement was significantly less. They did sort of throw in a bunch of, and I mentioned the lows, they threw in some very odd storylines in the second season. Nadine, who's a character in the show, who's an odd lady, missing an eye, gets super strength and also believes she's in high school. She's a late middle-aged lady, and now she's in the...
Part of the structure, I guess you will, of Twin Peaks in season 1 was it was almost an answer to like the evening soap opera, because back in that day, Dallas was huge, Dynasty was huge, and Twin Peaks took a lot of that form but kind of twisted it on its head, and it felt like part of season 2 they stopped like being a takeoff of that, and they started like going into that territory of becoming very soap opera-ish.
I can see that.
And some of those storylines, like also the storyline of the weird artist boyfriend guy of Sherilyn Finn and or not Sherilyn Finn, of
Laura?
No. Laura's friend.
Audrey. No, not Audrey.
No. Oh my gosh, Donna.
Donna, yes.
So the weird
Donna Hayward.
Yes, the weird artist boyfriend of Donna. That was a very odd subplot that ended up not really going anywhere.
And when James leaves Twin Peaks,
yes,
that goes nowhere.
Yeah. So I mean, there was season 2. It's still worth watching. I mean, like, don't get me wrong. Like, the whole everything of it is worth watching, but be prepared. Season 2's got some things that'll just make you say, like, what? Like Josie getting trapped inside a dresser.
Dresser, yes. I actually made a note here. Josie, my least favorite character in the show, pretty much useless, has a useless end.
Yeah.
She gets trapped inside of the IKEA dimension. She's a part of a piece of furniture. Makes no sense.
No, it doesn't.
And Mark Frost said that was his idea. I read an interview where he said that was his idea. They thought that it might be cool, but I think they were just kind of throwing stuff at the wall.
Yeah, even he's like, golly, that was kind of ridiculous.
But there are high highs, right? We talked about Wyndham Earl,
yes.
And then it introduces a love interest for Dale. Annie Blackburn, who is a waitress at Norma's Diner.
Double R.
Played
by Heather Graham.
Heather Graham, yes, and in one of her earlier appearances, maybe her first, like her breakout role.
May have been, I don't know.
So she is in love with Dale with her, and she becomes a very important part of the rest of the season because Wyndham Earl kidnaps her, right? He kidnaps her. I'm
Yes.
trying to remember.
Yes, he does. And takes her into the Black Lodge.
It takes her into the Black Lodge, and it sets up the finale where Dale goes into the evil Black Lodge, the evil place, home of Bob, or maybe Bob's home, or maybe his prison, maybe, right?
Who knows?
Right, exactly. And that's where the season 2 finale. That is where, when I joke about Lynch hurting the characters and thereby hurting the viewer, this is where that comes into play, because the season 2 finale mistreats Dale Cooper,
It's rough. It's
rough.
Yeah.
and you fall in love with this character, and the first time through, really even subsequent viewings as well, it's a pretty hopeless ending.
Yeah, it very much is. In this episode, we're spoiling it. Dale Cooper is trying to save Annie from the Black Lodge. He gets possessed by Bob and then leaves the Black Lodge. And the show ends with Cooper being possessed by Bob, and he's out and free in the world. And that's the ending. That's credits roll at that point.
So evil Coop is out in the world.
Yep. And good Coop
Good Coop is trapped in the Black Lodge.
Now, and an important point is that in the Black Lodge where the good Dale Cooper is trapped, Laura Palmer is there, and she says to him, "I will see you again in 25 years." And that becomes important later.
It does. It does. But before that becomes important, David Lynch got the opportunity to make a Twin Peaks movie.
Yes, and everybody who was a Twin Peaks fan at this time was so thrilled with that announcement, and they thought, the terrible ending that
It'll be made right.
Yeah, it's going to be made right. They'll explain it. They'll bring everything to a close, and Lynch did none of those things.
No, in fact, Lynch and Mark Frost had a disagreement because Mark Frost wanted to do a continuation and conclude the story, whereas David Lynch wanted to do a prequel.
Yep.
About Laura Palmer turning to the dark side. Yeah, prequels. Frost was not a part of it, and his absence is felt, I think, because he brought, I think, a certain lightness. And then this film, Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me, is the darkest, heaviest piece of Twin Peaks.
Yeah. In my show notes, I wrote, "This is a dark, dark, dark movie." That's 3 darks.
Yes. Yeah, very, very dark. And Lynchian, of course, obviously. But he was the driver, right? The Frost influence was gone, so he was he really took it in some bad places. It told the story leading up to Laura Palmer's murder. It told another story about a murder in I think it's an adjoining town to Twin Peaks, or a close town, of another young lady under very similar circumstances to Laura Palmer. And the investigation around that, another one of Gordon Cole's men, Agent Chet Desmond, played by Chris Isaac, and Sam, I believe Sam was played by Kiefer Sutherland.
That's right.
So the show opens, and you've got a new agent, and he kind of is dressed like Cooper, but he's not Cooper, right? He's very, very different from Cooper, almost like an anti-Cooper, whereas Cooper is positive and kind and polite. Chet Desmond is kind of a jerk, but he's also really, really smart, and obviously a very brilliant agent. And he's investigating a murder that is similar to Laura's in a town that is also kind of like the anti-Twin Peaks, almost like an inverse or a mirror image.
Right, because whereas in Twin Peaks everybody has this beautiful, perfect, nice veneer, in this other town everybody's just the trashiest human beings that are just despicable to each other.
Trailer park, the Happy Trout, is that what the trailer park's called?
Is that what I don't recall. Something like that.
Harry Dean Anderson's trailer park. Harry Dean Stanton. Harry Dean Anderson is MacGyver. Yeah, MacGyver is not part of it. Oh boy, MacGyver's not part of this. But that first 45 minutes is very good and interesting, and it adds some context to the world of Twin Peaks. You don't get Cooper, which if you want Cooper, you're not getting it in that part of the show. But it's still interesting. And they go to a diner, and the diner's full of rude people. The coffee's terrible. The food's not good. Right? I mean, you get and Chet makes Kiefer Sutherland's character spill coffee on himself and laughs not something Agent Dale Cooper would do. So you kind of get some stuff, and then you get an investigation in this creepy trailer park with Harry Dean Stanton, where he makes them a cup of coffee, a cup of Good Morning America is what he calls the coffee, which I think is just a hilarious name for coffee. You're introduced. They find Chet Desmond's character finds a Black Lodge artifact, this ring out there, and he disappears when he touches it, and you're like, what happened to Chet Desmond?
Well, that's the last
That's the last you hear of him ever. And then the show transitions into, you get some Cooper, you get some Gordon Cole, and you get, I think, maybe the best part of the movie, certainly one of the most interesting characters in the Twin Peaks universe. You get introduced to Agent Philip Jeffries, played by David Bowie.
Yes.
And you know what he's not going to talk about?
He's not going to talk about Judy.
He's not going to talk about Judy.
I'm not going to talk about Judy. In fact, we're not going to talk about Judy at all. We're going to keep her out of it.
In a weird scene in FBI headquarters I don't remember where.
So I don't remember where either, but before you get into that, in the story, Jeffries has vanished.
Vanished for years,
yeah,
like a decade or something.
Right. They haven't seen him. They know nothing about him. He's just this kind of apocryphal name that they mention from time to time, and then he just walks into FBI headquarters, and there he is. And Gordon Cole is like, Jeffries, oh my gosh, what are you doing here?
It says it much louder than that.
You're right, he does. But pretty much all we get is we're not going to talk about Judy. But one of the interesting things he says, and
I've been to one of their meetings.
it's above the convenience store, and he points to Cooper and he says,
Who do you think this is there?
what is remarkable to me about Firewalk with Me is, what was that, 94, 95?
Yeah.
And how much of these things that, as we're watching this in 94, 95, are completely random.
Right.
And they factor in so strongly to Twin Peaks: The Return.
Right, the third season-ish that's coming.
And that just blows my mind.
Yep. And you know, the Bowie's, you know, talking about, Philip Jeffries talking about Judy, right? Judy was a name of someone that somebody knew that thought it'd be cool to, when I read David Lynch was talking about it.
And there's no reference to Judy in season 1 or season 2.
Nope.
Like that's not a thing.
Or Juday.
Or Jowday.
Jowday, that's right.
Yeah, however you may want to pronounce it. But it becomes so central.
Right.
And that's amazing to me. But I think we'll get more into that when we start talking about The Return. But yeah, Bowie's there, and he's fantastic, and he's doing a Southern accent, which by all accounts that I've read, Bowie hated.
He did not like
Yeah.
it. In fact, to use his character in season 3, he said, "It's fine. You can use my footage. Just dub over."
Yeah, get somebody else to do
Get somebody else to do that accent.
And
He did not like it.
that was the last year of Bowie's life when they were filming Twin Peaks. So even though Lynch approached him, and it would have been fantastic for him to come back, he couldn't have done it. But yeah, he's there, and he's maybe 3 minutes of footage, if that. But
it sticks with you because it's interesting, and there's some things that are going on with time and dreams. Cooper says he had a dream about this moment, and he, you know, and then Philip Jeffries appears and then disappears, and there's no evidence that he was there except for he was on a video. And it's just so weird, and it's really, I think, the coolest part of. Not just because Bowie's in it, but it's just a really cool, mysterious part of the mythology, and I think of that movie.
Yeah, it's a really neat scene, and I'm apologize for taking us out of the chronological thing, but have you seen the missing? What is it called? Twin Peaks: The Missing Years, or something like that?
Yeah, the missing something. No, I've not.
Okay, so it's got
an expanded version. I have seen the expanded version of the scene where he appears in a hotel in Rio de Janeiro,
something like that.
Yeah,
Borneo, maybe, I don't know,
something, right?
Yeah, South America.
Yeah, and he appears and makes a guy soil his pants. He scares him.
Yeah,
and that was, I mean, but there's a little bit extra there.
Yeah, so there's a little bit more David Bowie. It expands it to maybe like a 5-minute role instead of the 2 or 3 minutes or whatever. But no, it's so interesting, and it seems like okay. So this is a criticism I had of Lynch in my early adult years, which is I felt like he was doing things that were just throwaway things for no other reason than to be weird. I don't have that opinion of David Lynch anymore. My opinion of David Lynch has actually grown a lot over my lifetime. And the fact that I don't know that he had this planned out, to Firewalk with Me, he's like, okay, in 25 years, I'm going to make a follow-up to Twin Peaks and all this is going to connect. Or it just goes back to that kind of artistic mentality he has of I'm in the moment and whatever comes to my mind, he really believes like there's a reason that came to his mind. And so he's going to commit to that. He's going to do it and he's going to figure it out as he goes. As strange as it sounds, I really kind of respect that about him. And he fascinates me the way he works.
Well, I do. I also respect that about him because he makes it work, right? It's not sloppy.
Right. Right.
He always, I've heard him say when he goes out and shoots, he has a script, even if he's going to deviate and do new things, but he always has a framework on which to go on. He's not just going out and just, opening the camera and shooting anything and making it fit together through editing. And if it didn't work, we wouldn't know who he is, right? I mean, it would just be, artsy film school type stuff,
right?
And when he would never have become a household name.
That's a good point.
It's not a household name. Would never become a subject of many pop culture podcasts. How about that?
There you go. Yeah, but after did you have anything else to say about Jeffrey Dick?
I do not.
Okay, so after that's when the movie
it takes a dark,
oh my goodness,
dark turn. And when I rewatched the film preparing for this, and I did rewatch a lot of stuff, and I'll say my prep for this was very unusual. I watched everything backwards, and since I started at the end of season 3, and watched episodes backwards, then Firewalk with Me is season 2, season 1. Because
that may be the most Twin Peaks thing you've ever done.
It was just a matter of I felt like that would be a good refresher for me and maybe put things in a different context.
Yeah.
I fast forwarded some parts of Firewalk with Me.
I don't blame you
because it's just too dark. It's just dirty, and there's like I don't really love that movie, but that second half of the movie or last third I dislike.
It is so uncomfortable. It's meant to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
As a piece of entertainment, I don't like Firewalk with Me either. As an artistic expression, I appreciate it. But in my lifetime, I've seen it twice. Like it's not something I'm going back to. Even when I'm like, I would like to revisit Twin Peaks. I don't watch the whole thing because it is just painfully dark.
And you can really get away with watching everything up to Jeffries, and you've got the best parts of it.
Well,
I think
you've got the story elements to it. Now, the statement that I made earlier, which is Firewalk with Me, I think, is an effort to redeem Laura Palmer. And so I'll speak to that a little bit because that second half of the movie is leading up to Laura's death. It's like the 2 or 3 days prior to her murder. And, you see her in an even darker tint than what the show ever showed her, and you see a lot more of the kind of really dangerous situations that she puts herself in. But there is this moment where she is selflessly sacrificing herself, and that is then after the murder we go to the Black Lodge, and there's this whole sequence that really kind of, it's like the only time you see Laura happy in the entire Twin Peaks, in everything, in the show or in the movie or whatever. So I really think that part of the intention of Firewalk with Me was Lynch giving Laura Palmer that moment, that just, even though this person has been through absolute hell, she's got that peace.
Okay.
And I find that compelling.
I forgot about the sacrifice, and saving Ronette.
That's correct.
That's right. I did. I actually forgot about that because I fast forwarded through so much of that part of the movie. But okay, I see that she had a moment of redemption. I just think that she was written in such an unlikable way, and also it became unlikable when other characters were talking about how wonderful she is, and you're like, oh, she's not wonderful. It just became kind of annoying.
Sure.
That it was easy to dislike her character, but. That's a fair point that she did. She did sort of. She had a moment of redemption. I was going to ask, how did she redeem herself? And now you've reminded me that she did. So.
Yeah, and I think that is important to the conversation.
So that it goes and it actually shows the murder of Laura Palmer in more detail. Her killed by her dad. Very creepy, very unsettling. really, that's kind of where it is. You get more myth, sort of the mythos inside the movie. When Philip Jeffries talks about going to one of their meetings above the convenience store, you get to see the meeting, you get to see the weirdness, the Formica tabletop, the very strange stuff.
Yes.
It's not, boy, I feel like this is an essential part of Twin Peaks, but it's unfortunate that it's essential because it's hard to watch.
It is. You're right on both counts. It is an essential part of Twin Peaks, and it is hard to watch. I think there is kind of this feeling in our podcast that when we talk about things, we are in essence encouraging people to experience them. And this one does have a pretty substantial warning to it.
It does. It really does. You could be perfectly happy watching Twin Peaks season 1 and 2 and just really stopping there, I think. And being okay and you don't have to go on. But if you do go on this one, I would just have your finger on the fast forward button.
Yeah, because it gets very graphic. It gets very rough. Even some of the implied things that happen in the story are just horrific.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrific. I would say if you're going to experience Twin Peaks and that worries you, carry on to The Return. Even though Firewalk with Me connects in brilliant ways to The Return, I think you can enjoy The Return without Firewalk with Me. And I think that there are some incredible things in The Return. So I would hesitate to tell anyone to skip that.
Okay. I want to hear about these incredible things.
All right.
So Firewalk with Me wrapped, and there was some other media around this time before you go on the long pause. Some books.
Let me pause you there because one other thing I want to say about Firewalk with Me, this movie was hated.
It did not turn a profit.
Everybody hated
Poorly
this movie.
reviewed, yes.
It was poorly reviewed. The audience score hated it. It didn't make any money. There were a lot of people, even David Lynch fans, were like, there's no coming back from this. And what's amusing to me is that if you look at a modern review of the film, it's actually reviewed very positively. People have warmed up to this movie, and I think a lot of it is because The Return was so good. And then people who, after they watch The Return, they're going back and revisiting Firewalk with Me, and they're looking at it with completely different eyes. Because if you saw this in 94, 95, whenever it came out, it's hard to like this movie. It's really, really hard.
It is.
All right, so now talk about your extra media.
Yeah, we had a couple of books. Dale Cooper's notes. Dale Cooper. What was it called?
The audio diaries of Dale
yes,
Cooper.
The audio
something
diaries
like
of
that?
Dale Cooper. So it was all the stuff that Dale Cooper is talking into his little microtape recorder for Diane. It's a book of those, his communications with Diane. It gives some background on Wyndham Earle. And we had that book. We bought it at a used bookstore and read it. I don't remember much about it, but I know that we read it.
Do you remember the audio book?
Was there an audio?
There was an audio book, and it was read by Kyle MacLachlan.
Was it now?
Yeah.
All right.
And we
No,
had
I
that-
don't. Apparently.
So it was abridged, so it was not the whole thing.
Okay.
But we came across that as well in our hunting. But it was very strange that we even found that because we didn't have, we're in the middle of the country. We didn't get a lot of stuff like that. We couldn't go to Walden Book and find that on the shelves. We just happened upon it in a used bookstore. That one in The Diary of Laura Palmer.
The Diary of Laura Palmer. And
Yeah.
I don't know if I read that. I don't know if I did or not. If I did, I don't remember anything about it.
It was not okay. So again, I haven't read it since mid-90s. I don't remember it being that interesting. It was kind of dry and it was kind of boring. The Dale Cooper book, we ate that up.
Yeah.
That was just fantastic.
It was just you're in Dale Cooper's head.
Exactly. Yeah, but the Diary of Laura Palmer, I don't remember it being that interesting. So it just kind of sat on the shelf as a collectible.
But for 20 some odd years, that's all you got.
That's all you got. Yeah.
It was done. It was dead, and then the talk of a season 3 came about. And when I heard the talk, I didn't think it was gonna. I really did not think it was gonna happen. I just thought, there's not a big enough fan base. Lynch won't want to give himself to something like that. I just didn't think it would happen. And to my surprise, there was a huge fan base, and Lynch really gave himself over for years to record about 18 hours-ish worth of material, 20 hours, somewhere in there. And so we got The Return. Now, is it officially season 3, or is it just called Twin Peaks The Return?
It's officially called Twin Peaks The Return. However, everybody, and probably even including David Lynch himself, is like, it's season 3. But if you buy the DVD or if you look at the Showtime material or anything like that, It never says season 3. It just says Twin Peaks: The Return.
So it came out on Showtime.
Yep.
It dropped every week.
Yep.
And I remember watching it every week. And, oh boy, I got some thoughts here. So where the show ended 25 years ago, you got Coop, evil Coop's out in the world, good Coop's in the Black Lodge, and then you got the show.
But let's dwell on 25 years for a second, because Laura Palmer said at the end of season 2, "I'll see you again in 25 years."
Yes.
25 real, actual, human, real-world years passed.
Yes.
And that's when Twin Peaks: The Return landed.
Yep.
Now, of course, they did not plan that in 1991, but the fact that they had the forethought to be like, hey, remember that weird throwaway line we put in there, and we're coming up on the maybe we should. I love that. And the fact that that 25 years later, by gum,
They got it.
and
Yep.
she saw him again 25 years later.
25 years, right?
Yep.
You got that gap. And you're quickly introduced to the Coop who is in the world, which is evil Coop,
Yep.
Mr. C.
Mr. C, yep.
A criminal, like a crime lord type fella, who is also has the power of Bob, right? He's got super strength and super intelligence, and he's not. He's got all of Cooper's natural abilities and some supernatural abilities as well.
Yeah.
Although it doesn't really get into what those are, but I mean, you see evidence of arm wrestling a dude and just basically breaking his arm off and punching a guy's face in, and surviving getting shot. And so you're like, okay, we got evil Coop. You see good Coop in the lodge. You get a little bit of that. You're like, all right, come on, Cooper, let's get out, and we're gonna get like 18 episodes of good Coop versus evil Coop, and this is going to be glorious.
Well,
It's not what happens.
No.
And very little of the show is set in Twin Peaks.
yeah.
This was so frustrating for me. And what is set in Twin Peaks is typically in the Roadhouse, and you get these overly long musical numbers by Lynch's favorite, almost like, hey, I'm going to make a Showtime show, and I'll have Eddie Vedder and Trent Reznor come in, and they'll sing some songs, and that'll fill some time. That was frustrating. And then and you've got all these new characters, and Dale Cooper, you're getting just glimpses of him in the lodge where he's not really speaking, and when you think you're going to get him back, you don't.
No.
You get Dougie Jones,
Yep.
the most frustrating character in the history of television, because you think you're getting Dale Cooper back, and you get Kyle MacLachlan. He looks like Dale Cooper, but he's this other character set in Las Vegas named Dougie Jones, an insurance investigator. But he doesn't speak.
Yeah.
He's running. I don't even know how to describe him, but he is not. He's like an infant or like a toddler almost in terms of his abilities, but he's also like, the little bits of Cooper come out, like if somebody pulls a gun on him and he disarms him like a Dale Cooper would. But you get this character for it wasn't like it was 1 or 2 episodes, like 13 episodes.
I think it was more. I think it was 16.
Oh my gosh, you're following this character, and all you want is Dale Cooper back. You don't get him.
No, you don't. Let me explain a little bit more of this for any audience member who has not seen this show. There is a plot point in Twin Peaks where people can make doppelgangers of themselves.
Tulpas is what they
Tulpas, yes. And so whenever Mr. C, the evil Coop, came out at the end of season 2, for the last 25 years, he's been wreaking havoc on the planet and just doing terrible, horrible, criminal type things. And he knows that Good Coop is in the lodge and he wants to come out. Well, if Good Coop comes out, that means Bad Coop has to go in. So Mr. C creates a tulpa of himself, which is Dougie Jones. And so then when Good Coop comes out of the lodge, he goes into Dougie Jones instead of Mr. C, so Mr. C can keep doing his thing, and then Cooper has to figure out his way outside of Dougie Jones. That's that's like the high-level explanation for what's happening. So that's why we have multiple Coopers, and that's why Kyle MacLachlan gets to play 3 people in Twin Peaks: The Return, rather than just 1 or 2. But that being said, it is this consistent inverting of expectations that I think Lynch is playing with here. So you do not get 18 episodes of Dale Cooper doing Dale Cooper things. You, in fact, get 2 episodes of Dale Cooper doing Dale Cooper
And
things.
barely at that, right?
And barely at that. But what you get is you get Gordon Cole doing Dale Cooper things.
Yeah.
You know, and so that FBI presence is there. That mystery solving is there. And you get the Gordon Cole and the Albert Show, which is played by Miguel Ferreira, who
passed away
right after this. Yeah. Phenomenal actor.
Very good.
And had he not passed away, I would be like, I want the Gordon and Albert show. I want like that. Show me that. I want to see more of that because they're just phenomenal together. So you get like all of the flavors that you're looking for are there. They're just not coming the way that you want them to come. And I understand your statement that that's frustrating, but I will say for me, I was so along for the ride. Like I was in for this, and every moment with Dougie Jones, I'm laughing myself silly. I'm very interested in this. Naomi Watts plays his wife.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. So good. Such an interesting character, such a great performance.
Janie.
Yes. So all of these things come together. I am a massive fan of The Return. It is my favorite Lynch thing ever. And I think it's one of the best things that I've ever seen, honestly. I think it's tremendous.
So as a Lynch thing, it's very good.
As Twin
Peaks, it is massively disappointing because it's not even set in Twin Peaks. I mean, maybe 20% of the time, if that. And if you take the Roadhouse stuff out of it, because that's mostly just musical performances, it's barely set in Twin Peaks.
But it's so interesting. And we go back to all the Twin Peaks characters, so we see a ton of them, and we understand. Well, I understand is maybe a strong word. We see what they're doing, you know. So we reconnect with Bobby Briggs, and he's one of the most interesting characters.
So right. I made that note. That's one of the better things about it is the redemption of Bobby Briggs.
Exactly. So here you had this drug dealing punk. He's now a police officer in Twin Peaks. He's completely turned his life around. And in fact, without going into too much detail about the show, he lives in some very sad circumstances. You feel very bad for him. But you see Bobby, you see Hawk, you see Lucy, you see what was Lucy's husband's name?
Andy.
Yep. So you see Lucy and Andy, you see their son. Played by Michael Cera in probably the most bizarre sequence in Twin Peaks: The Return. You know, President Truman, Sheriff Truman.
Sheriff Truman's brother.
Sheriff Truman is not in the show, but his brother has taken
Frank Truman, I believe.
I forget. So he's represented there. You see the log lady; she's in the show in a very moving performance. Gosh, we didn't even talk about the log lady.
Right.
Anyway. So she's in this, you see all the heavy hitters. You see all these people and you see where they are. And then all the extra stuff that's happening around it is that connection to, I hate to use the word lore because I think it's overused and it's getting tiresome, but it's connected to that overarching story. And after watching The Return, I like season 2 of Twin Peaks a lot more because it feels more complete now. Like before, all that stumbling that they were doing, trying to figure out where they were going, like it as a whole, it really makes a lot of sense. And it all ties together under this pretense of the murder of Laura Palmer. And that is even given greater gravitas in The Return than just being, oh, well, this is a foil to play with these characters. So the way it all comes together, it impressed me very much. And you had some people in there whom I don't typically appreciate as an actor.
Matthew
Lillard. Jim Belushi, but they are remarkable in the show, and I wanted to see more of them in the show. And so, I mean, kudos to David Lynch for being able to get those performances out of these people. I was so into it, and I think it's cliche to be like, oh, well, it's not a television show; it's an 18-hour movie. I don't usually adhere to that kind of things, but for this one, that may be what it is.
Sure.
It may just be one big 18-hour David Lynch movie.
Arbitrarily cut up with the musical performances become the breaks.
Right. But that's even used in such interesting ways to me. Because like if you know anything about The Return, episode 8 is an infamous episode.
Oh, I have a note here. Yeah. But that episode 8, right? It's great. Everybody told me that you have to forgive all of the issues you have with Twin Peaks: The Return, because episode 8 is so good.
Okay, well, first of all, it is so good. But secondly, what's to forgive about Twin Peaks: The Return? I genuinely love every bit of it. I think it's phenomenal. And so that episode 8, but what I wanted to talk about episode 8 before we get into what happens is the structure of it is so interesting. And so you've had 7 episodes where you got the show, and then you end at the Roadhouse, and you end with a full musical performance with a full song, and then usually in the middle of the song something strange happens, and then you go to credits. You've had this format for the whole thing. In episode 8, you get like 10 minutes of a show, and then you get that song. And even the credits run. And so you're like, well, is this a 10-minute episode? What's going on here? And then the remaining 50 minutes is, I guess, like a story outside of the context of Twin Peaks. Like it matters to Twin Peaks, but it's presented as this is different. I mean, and I loved that structure. I loved how Lynch played with that. And kind of had this pattern that he followed until he broke it. And then because he'd followed the pattern, and then after he broke it, the pattern continued to extend, it became a really significant moment. But I think episode 8 is amazing. I mean, I'm blown away by it.
Well, again, it did not feel like Twin Peaks to me. It was good, right? I look at it, say, objectively, this is well done. It's well acted. So what episode 8 is it goes back to the atomic bomb test. And it shows that the atomic bomb test, I think, right? But it shows that it opened up something which allowed these evil spirits, these Black Lodge entities, to come into our world. And that it shows how those entities then kind of move through America, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think take over Laura Palmer's mom. I think that's a theory, maybe. I don't know.
It's a theory, yeah.
These the woodsmen, right, is what they're called, right? These they go and they kill everybody in a town. They take over a radio station and repeat this odd verse. This is the water. This is the well.
This is the water, and this is the well. Drink full, and ascend.
Very odd, and well done. Right, and the most polished in terms of presentation, in terms of effects, episode in the series. They spent like their budget.
Yeah, they did
on that episode. But it's like, okay, when you came here for Twin Peaks and you came here for this story that you fell in love with over those first 2 seasons, and all of your energy is put into something that is, outside of it. It becomes frustrating. And it's an expectations management thing. If you did not expect Twin Peaks, you would probably be very happy with what you got. But if you came in expecting, the adventures of Dale Cooper and, catching up with Audrey and all the other folks in a more meaningful way than what we got, if you expect that, you're gonna be disappointed.
That's certainly not what you're getting. Maybe it's my headspace that contributed to me really appreciating The Return. But, I made a comment in a couple of episodes back where I think Hollywood oftentimes does nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. And that was my biggest worry going into a supposed season 3 of Twin Peaks, was that it was, this is just going to be a cash grab and a nostalgia trip. And it was so not that. And it played with those expectations so well that I really connected with it. And, you say it's not Twin Peaks, and I understand why you say that, but it wraps around in such interesting ways and finally connects to Twin Peaks that, to me, it very much feels like it's a cohesive whole. It's just 25 years separated, and everybody is way different 25 years later. Then nobody's going to be the same after that much time passes. And I think Twin Peaks: The Return represents that in a way that we don't see in television or film or in any kind of media, really. And I think it's fascinating. And I think Lynch just absolutely knocked this out of the park. And I dearly love it.
He took some big risks and he made some interesting things. And you did get the return of Philip Jeffries as a Teapot.
Yeah, Teapot, yeah. Which if you're listening and that doesn't turn you off, then hey, have at it.
Yes, you got a little bit more of what he was talking about, and he's got some conflict with Mr. C. It's not clear whose side. To me, it wasn't clear whose side Philip Jeffries is on, right? If he's on
Yeah.
any side at all.
Right. It's ambiguous. I guess that's what happens when you get turned into a teapot.
Teapot, right?
Yeah.
You sort of lose your moral center, maybe, or you're above it. You're out of you're neutral, maybe. I don't know. It's an interesting. It was interesting, right? Because he's like, okay, what are you now? And are you trapped in there, or is that keeping you alive? The teapot, no idea. Right?
No idea.
I wanted to ask you about this. You mentioned Cole. We are introduced finally to Diane.
Yes, we are.
What did you think about Diane, her character, her performance? Laura Dern plays Diane.
So Laura Dern is the only person who could have played Diane. Nobody else makes sense. Anybody else would have been a disappointment. And Diane, having been this fixture of the show and so important to Dale Cooper, even though you never meet this person, you never see them, hear them, anything. They're just this nebulous entity. And then if you're going to bring Diane into the show and have them portrayed by a human, it's got to be Laura Dern. And when Lynch did that, it was one of those things where it's like there is no more perfect solution to that problem. Now, the character of Diane and what has happened to her in the course of the story is very sad and very tragic and very dark in very much the same way that Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me is very dark. I mean, this woman has had some history, and it's not pleasant. And it involves Mr. C. I mean, so Cooper, who she's had this positive relationship with, and then we don't exactly know what Mr. C has done, but we know that, well, he looks like Cooper, and so I mean that there's trauma there, and one thing Twin Peaks deals with over and over and over again is trauma. So that part is, it leads to the darkness of the show. It deals with uncomfortable subjects. So when you say, how did I feel about Diane? I mean, there's definitely some darkness there. There's definitely some uncomfortableness there. But as far as the portrayal and Laura Dern playing Diane, flawless.
Very conflicted because she was unlikable. Mm-hmm. She was just so hard and harsh, and I didn't know who she was betraying, why she was doing the things she was doing. Her behavior was, to me, not consistent with the character that we had expected, hoped, even though we never met her before. She was Dale Cooper's trusted assistant. It did look like Mr. C had twisted her and got her to switch sides, but it was just another unlikable character. Like I think I felt like Lynch was taking glee in, for the most part, taking some of these characters and just I don't know, making them unlikable. And it's not fair because I mean he did the opposite with Bobby Briggs, right? He took a despicable character and made him very likable and respectable. And I don't know, it wasn't like the most offensive thing to me, but it was like, man, I would have liked to have understood why she was that way, so I could have at least empathize with her a little bit.
It does kind of come out in the show, and she does, like, her motivations are explained as much as anything in Twin Peaks is explained, and then she ends up being an integral part for the real Agent Cooper to help him solve the conflict that's presented. So she does kind of come around, and she's got her own kind of redemption story within the process of it. But it's interesting that you said that, and that earlier comment you made about Fire Walk with Me, where in the first part it's like they're in the bizarro Twin Peaks where everybody's flipped. In the return, you're kind of seeing that again, because all of the bad, terrible characters in season 1 and season 2 have now been redeemed or at the very least neutralized in the return, whereas some of the characters that were near and dear to your hearts have gone through the horrible experiences and horrible trauma, and now they are broken and in some cases ill. Right, like that's how they explain Harry Truman's absence, is he's got cancer,
yeah.
And so he's dealing with that. So there's some of that inversion that's happening in Twin Peaks: The Return as well. I eat that kind of stuff up. I love to see that kind of thing in story.
The show is really about Mr. C trying to stay in the real world and not go back to the lodge because it's his time to come back, and so he's created this Dougie Jones character. And there's a lot of other stuff going on trying to explain sort of the cosmology of the Twin Peaks universe. Good luck following it.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's just layer upon layer of these visual things that don't completely makes sense, right? Probably to Lynch, they do. I would suspect that he's not just doing things to be weird, that he's got a point to it. But that's the driver. So Mr. C's going around trying to get coordinates for a place, and it becomes a coordinates hunt a little bit, and he goes into some criminal adventures, and he meets some other criminals and takes over a gang by winning an arm wrestling match. Very over the top.
Yeah.
Arm wrestling tournament.
Yeah.
Shows his enhanced physical abilities by breaking a guy's arm off. Mr. C is a really interesting character.
Yeah.
He's a great bad guy. The show ends up with him making his way back to Twin Peaks. And roughly at the same time, Dougie Jones wakes up, or
Coop
wakes up inside of Dougie Jones,
Yeah.
and also makes his way to Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
With the help of mobsters who were also good guys, played by
Well, it's 'cause-
Belushi, Jim Belushi.
But Dougie had been so helpful to
Doug,
the
you've been so
mobsters
helpful,
that,
right?
yeah.
Yes. We get another character here. The fellow with the magical green garden glove.
Yeah.
Really important character.
Yeah. That comes out of nowhere.
Comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
He's got a garden glove that's on his hand.
He's got a very strange backstory.
Yep. And gives him powers. He's
Yeah.
got super strength. So that is important. He
It is.
punches Bob,
Yeah.
glowing Bob Orb, to death.
Yeah. And saves the day.
Saves the day. So
Yeah.
Bob comes out of Mr. C. They manage to harm his body, and you see he gets harmed through the episodes, but he's brought back by the woodsmen. They come back and they tend to him, but he's harmed. Mr. C is, and then Bob comes out, and magical green garden glove guy. This character, he plays a security guard.
Yeah.
And he's got his green garden glove and super strength, and Cooper tells him to do it, to punch him. I can't remember the exact words. Coop shows up, but doesn't do much, just kind of stands there, and so this guy punches the Bob Orb, because the actor who played Bob, Henry,
I don't know his name.
yeah, I can't remember his name, is dead. So they just had to use his face on a floating orb.
Yeah.
And the guy punches him, and he goes back to the Black Lodge, I guess. I don't know. He does. Doesn't he go back to the Black Lodge?
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's yeah, I don't know. That's one of those mysteries. It's up to your interpretation.
Yeah.
Like, because you could believe that he's been permanently destroyed, but you could also believe that he's back in the Black Lodge.
So that's in the second to last episode. And then Coop goes off on a journey through time to try and prevent the murder of Laura Palmer. And this is where I find this very interesting. And I was not frustrated by this. I found this fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
But he tries to save Laura. And I think the way I'm interpreting is he realizes he cannot save Laura.
Yeah, I think that's a fair interpretation. Or that, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different ways to read this. Because when he meets Laura in this alternate timeline, I guess you could call it, she does not identify as Laura, but this woman has not had a good life either. I mean, she's Carrie Page, is that her name? Page is right. Carrie, I'm maybe
I don't remember.
wrong. All right. So anyway, the other Laura Palmer, he finds her. He knocks on her apartment. She opens the door.
She's a waitress at Judy's.
Oh,
Judy's Diner. That's how
holy
he knows how to find her.
cow! I think I had forgotten that
Yeah.
completely. So okay,
But
yeah.
I think we should just back up just a little bit. He goes in time, tries to save her, and then he gets in sort of this alternate timeline.
Right.
He kind of sidesteps.
Yeah.
Tough to describe.
It is very tough to describe, and it's connected with a conversation they had in the very first episode of The Return, where the fireman, separate from the woodsman, different character,
Big tall guy.
yeah, the fireman, he's like, look for these things, and he gives them a sound and a number, and maybe a third thing I don't remember. But anyway, like all of that connects to this last episode, and it's like all of those clues that he uses in order to do his trip through time and space or dimensions or whatever you want to call it. And Diane is with him, and she's integral to the journey. And then he ends up in this alternate world where even the rules are different. Like the encounter with the thugs at the restaurant, and so there's a scene in the very beginning where Mr. C does this really cool thing with somebody who's attacking with a shotgun, and he just like disarms him like Jackie Chan style.
Yeah.
It's a really neat scene. you never see good Coop do anything physical at all. But then in this alternate reality, when he's at Judy's diner, these guys try to rob it, and Coop just takes them out, and disarms them of their weapons, sends them on their way, and then throws the weapons into the fry basket.
Yes, that's very dangerous, by the way. Don't do that.
I would imagine. Yeah, that's not where I store my firearms. But so there's this also this change in Cooper himself. Like, we're not dealing with the Dale Cooper that we've always been dealing with.
He's different. He's not nice.
Right.
He's still motivated to save Laura.
Right.
But he's a different character, and that it was interesting. It's like, oh, we finally waited to get Cooper back, and then
now he's gone
he
again.
doesn't do much,
No.
and then he's different again.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, are you just toying with us, David?
Well, but there's that weird scene towards the middle where Gordon Cole is talking about his dream. Do you remember
the Monica
that?
Bellucci?
Yes.
I had another Monica Bellucci dream.
Yeah.
Yes. Do the voice.
But the dream that Gordon Cole has is a real thing that happened to David Lynch.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So the location in Paris where he's having the conversation with Monica Bellucci, they're sitting in front of the art gallery where David Lynch displays his artwork.
Oh.
And so, like, at that moment, I guess we're supposed to understand that Gordon Cole is dreaming David Lynch's life. I don't know. So there's like all the, and then the thing with Audrey Horne, where she's in the show.
Yes.
Like there's a lot of stuff about the return in Twin Peaks as a whole where it's like, how am I supposed to interpret this? And like, there's a lot of it that makes me want to interpret it metatextually.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's accurate.
I hope it's not. I have a note here. Is this show some sort of meta commentary? And I hope it's not.
It may be. But part of the beauty of Twin Peaks, and I'm skipping ahead a little bit, is it's all these things and more, right? So you can really interpret it however you want. So, but there's all these layers, and my gosh, I feel bad for anyone listening to this who has not seen Twin Peaks, because we've just been blabbering on for ever about nothing that makes any sense at all. But that's kind of the Twin Peaks experience as well, right? So Coop ends up in this alternate reality, and he's obviously not the same as Dale Cooper that we know, but he's still kind of Cooper, and he's still trying to save Laura Palmer. And he finds someone who looks like Laura Palmer, but is named Carrie Page, and in her apartment is a dead body, and we don't know why, but I think that's like the setup of, well, she's still dealing with her own inner demons, or she's still mixed up with the wrong crowd, or whatever. I think that's the message we're supposed to get. So he takes her to Twin Peaks, back to her home.
Back to what was Laura Palmer's home.
Correct. What was Laura Palmer's home? They knock on the door. I don't know if you knew this, but the person who answers the door
who owns the house.
is the person who owns the house in the real world, in real life. That's who answers the door. So again, was that just funny? And David Lynch was like, oh, this will be great? Or is this a clue that now we have crossed over and we're not in fiction world anymore? We're in, I don't know. So, and she's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. They shut the door. And then Cheryl Lee, who plays Laura Palmer, they're walking back into the street, and she looks around and she screams. And,
but Cooper asks the question first.
Oh, that's right. He does.
What year is it?
What year is it? And then Carrie Page screams. The electricity pops. Everything goes dark. And that's the end.
And then I look at my wife and apologize. I'm sorry I made you sit through this, because she was my wife, Mary, my lovely wife, was very frustrated when Twin Peaks season 2, right?
I'm sure she was.
She learned season 2, like, this character, Dale Cooper, she loved him, that's great. And now he's stuck, and that's it. And then, she was hoping to get some sort of resolution on that, and then they're stuck again. Pretty frustrating.
So another thing that I'll just do an aside and mention, there's this brilliant scene in The Return where Cooper is, we forgot the part where Cooper goes back in time, and he goes back to the night of Laura Palmer's murder.
To try to save her.
Like, that's the first step in trying to save her. And so they intercut footage from Firewalk with Me. But there's this moment in Firewalk with Me when in 94, 95 makes no sense at all, because Laura's talking to James, and she just looks beyond James's shoulder and she screams for no reason. And like in Firewalk with Me in the film, they never do a cutaway. They never explain what she's screaming about. Nothing. It was just one of those weird David Lynch moments. In The Return, she sees Cooper, and that's what she's screaming at.
That's right.
And just the connection there is amazing to me.
I didn't quite pick up on that. Now I
Right.
yes, yeah.
And so that happens, and then it's layer upon layer upon layer. And I think you're probably right. I think David Lynch could stand here if he was willing and exactly explain to us everything that's happening. He will never do that.
No.
Because that's part of his thing. He believes art deserves to be interpreted. And he has set up this whole thing so that we can have this podcast. I mean, that was, kind of his motivation behind it. He likes it when people analyzes the art and brings their own emotions and their own life experiences to it and get something out of it. And that is one of the things that makes me appreciate David Lynch the most, is I love doing that. And I love the fact that he creates these vehicles to allow me to do that.
Really, really difficult because big time investment.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel like we got any further in the story. And if you were expecting the story to move forward, if you were trying to get to a destination, then you're going to deal with some disappointment. If you're just experiencing it and going along with it, and where it ended up wasn't nearly as important, I think you would enjoy that. But my expectations were off.
Mm.
I think that I've thought, and I went through and watched it again as part of the prep for this. I didn't watch all of it, but I watched some of it. I had it on while I was doing other things. I didn't have a lot of time to dedicate to it, except for episode 8, which I watched very closely, trying to see if I was missing something. And I think I did appreciate that one much more in the second viewing. I just realized that it was expectations management.
Yeah.
If I had gone in and tempered it and thought Lynch is not going to give us a happy ending, that doesn't mean he's going to give us a sad ending, but he's going to give us something that's challenging. And if I had just expected that, I probably would have been a lot more happy.
Yeah. And I did kind of in my life have a little bit of a David Lynch revival where I reevaluated my opinion of him and really came out with a much more positive opinion. And so the way I approach David Lynch material is this is going to be more of a feeling, more of an emotion, more of like a tone poem, if you will, other than a narrative story. And for me, that's the correct way to approach David Lynch material. So when I saw Twin Peaks: The Return, that's how I approached it. And I was rewarded every step of the way. And my expectations were far exceeded. Like I said, I think it's Lynch's magnum opus. I think it is brilliant. I don't know, honestly, I don't know if he'll do anything else. I mean, he's in his 80s, for crying out loud.
He is?
Yeah, he's up
pretty
there.
good for 80.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I didn't know he smoked like it was a chain smoker. I thought he was some sort of health nut.
Oh, no. Yeah, no, he smokes like a chimney. So I don't know if he is even interested in doing another film or anything. So that might be the end cap to his career. And what an end cap. I mean, I think it's a remarkable series. I dearly love it. I don't feel like it's as dark as Firewalk with Me. It certainly deals in some dark material. So, also audience warning, as far as that goes. But if you're willing to accept surrealism, it is one of the best examples of that that I can come up with.
It is much more balanced than Firewalk with Me. You get some light, some levity. Dougie Jones is there's levity there, right? He's an innocent, goofy character. You get a little bit more of Harry Dean Stanton's Fat Trout, I think, is what his trailer park manager, and going on some kind of mission. I think it uncovered he's a bookhouse boy, I think, which is sort of their a bunch of locals who get together to fight the evil in the area.
Right.
And I just like Harry Dean.
Passed away as well.
He passed away right after.
So many people
Yes.
passed away right after making the show, which is sad. If there is ever a Twin Peaks season 4, it'll be even more different than the return.
I don't think there will be.
No,
I
I don't
really,
think so,
truly, I don't know if Lynch has anything to say. I think him returning to this world was a shock to me, and I don't know. I think that would be very out of character for him. I love Twin Peaks, but I do feel like Lynch, and I know I've heard him talk about this, and he says that he does not hate the audience, but I feel like he mistreats his characters, and knowing that hurts the audience, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like he does not like his audience.
I don't think that. I think, having I read his I don't know if you call it an autobiography. It's co-written, and it's very David Lynch, because his biographer writes a chapter, and then he writes a chapter after it telling the same story. So I mean, it's a bizarre book, but I read that, and it's very interesting, and his approach to creativity is very unique, but he has thought this through, right? I mean, he's not just like out there in the cosmos and just like, oh, I'm just grasping, like where he believes ideas come from and how he believes he taps into that and how he wants to tell a story. He can sit down and walk you through every step of the way. And it's certainly not the way I would approach story. But I think that the way he does it is perfectly valid. And I think it has created a very interesting body of work. I don't rewatch some of his movies, but I'm glad they exist, and I'm glad he's a filmmaker that was able to have a point of view, because the odds of somebody letting him do the art the way they have, that was stacked against him, and he figured out a way to do it anyway, and he produced some incredible work.
So let's go back to the question that we asked at the beginning: is why is Twin Peaks so beloved? Why is it, cult following? I think it's a little bit more than that, right?
I agree.
I think it's bigger than a cult following. The investment that Showtime put into 18 episodes of this is more than a cult following would garner, I think. Why is it?
I don't have an answer. Like going back to season 1, when that pilot aired on TV, and even though we were both very praiseworthy of that pilot, there are things in that pilot that I do not understand how an early 90s audience reacted positively to it, because it is unlike anything you've seen even to this day. Like if you watch the pilot of Twin Peaks, there are moments where you're just like, wait, what? And the fact that there were so many elements of that and people latched onto it so strongly, other than it just being like one of those right time, right place moments, I don't have an explanation for it. There is not a single moment in the world where you would show me that pilot and I would be like, oh, that's going to be a hit.
Right.
I would be like, you'll be lucky to get 4 or 5 episodes, and there will be a group of people that talk about it for the rest of forever.
But you're going to lose most of your viewers.
Right. And that first season, people held on. I mean, it was a fever pitch in the United States, and then even in foreign countries, it went on to have a huge success in foreign territories.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
Absolutely. Well, you've seen the Japanese coffee commercials, have you?
I don't think I
Oh,
have.
yeah, they did a whole Georgia Coffee, which I don't know why a Japanese coffee company named themselves Georgia Coffee. I don't know, but they did.
Georgia, very famous for its coffee fields.
I don't know. Anyway, if you say so.
No, it's not. Yeah.
No, of course it isn't. But they did a whole series of Twin Peaks. They told like a Twin Peaks story in their advertisement for Georgia Coffee, and Kyle MacLachlan was in them.
Was any of the stars?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Those are all on YouTube. You can look them up. I mean, so Twin Peaks is huge, and it's influenced so many things. A ton of stuff, even going to like the Legend of Zelda. There's on record of the people who made Zelda, it was like, oh, we were hugely influenced by Twin Peaks. And it's like, really? How do you figure? Yeah, I know, it's bizarre, but it was specifically Link's Awakening, the Game Boy one. And if you look at it at that one, you're in a village populated by bizarre people. So it's like, okay, well, now that you say that, fine. But the fact that Twin Peaks got that far into the creative consciousness of the world, I can't explain it.
Yeah, no, I think a couple things. I mean, I think with great characters. I think a storyline that is up for interpretation, so people can find their own ways into the story and find their own thing that they like about it. I do think though it's the characters. And you would like to spend time with some of the characters. But I can't fully explain it because, especially after, where Cooper was left in season 2, a lot of people were hurt by that, but they came back. And the darkness of Firewalk with Me, which is just hard to watch, and they came back. Even, I think that they've reevaluated their opinion of that movie. Once hated, now it's viewed as an essential part of Twin Peaks.
Right.
I'm with you. I think that there's certainly lots to like about it, and but it's not like a clear cut. I can draw a line between what I like and what's in Twin Peaks, and it makes sense because it doesn't fully.
No, yeah, no, I agree. It doesn't. Now, your statement about they came back even afterwards, I think that the 25-year gap really helped with that. And what is kind of remarkable to me is that the return was pretty universally accepted.
Yes.
I mean, there were not a lot of people that were like, nah, this isn't for me. And your point that if you came in thinking, oh, finally we're going to get season 2 resolved, we're going to find out what's going to happen. If you came in with that, it's very easy to see how you would be disappointed with the return. But it seems like the majority of people were not disappointed by it. So, I mean, it speaks to Lynch's talent. I think it speaks to the cast's talent to be able to pull off the material. And I think it speaks to the open-mindedness of the audience. This is something that I've always said is I think filmmakers too often treat the audience like they're idiots. And I think that's a mistake. And I think people are getting tired of that. You can expect a lot of your audience, and you can take them along for a journey where you don't have to spell every single thing out, and people are going to find enjoyment in that. And I think Twin Peaks is an excellent example of proving that point.
Lynch does trust his audience and challenges them. It doesn't spoon feed them anything. It's also an important piece of television, right? I think that it raised the bar on quality TV. I think shows like The Sopranos and Breaking Bad, not shows that I particularly like, but they owe a lot to Twin Peaks because it showed that prestige television was a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Made for TV was an insult at one time, and I think Twin Peaks showed, hey, you can do a lot of really great things. It's a form for good art. And of course now, everything's on TV, right? And streaming, and it's totally different. But Twin Peaks was doing that before it was cool. Maybe that, to me, is its biggest legacy. Is it just opened the door for artistic expression, good quality TV shows, and showed that it was possible, maybe even profitable.
And I've always been the kind of person who I like the stuff that's off the beaten path. I'm much more interested in a Twin Peaks show than I am like an NYPD Blue type show.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's just been my own taste that gravitate towards that way. And so I think Twin Peaks opened the door for a lot of, unique stories about unique individuals. And I appreciate that.
Did it make you a little bit distrustful? I mean, I think your and I's perspective on this are different of TV series. Like, oh, it's gonna disappoint me. And Twin Peaks, oh man, I fell in love with it. I invested time, and did you ever did Twin Peaks make you hesitant to get into other TV shows?
No, but I think that was because of the context that I saw it. If I had not been a David Lynch fan and I would have just seen like the promos on ABC or whatever and tuned in and got hooked on it, maybe, because of the way it was handled. But because I knew a lot of that creative team, because I mean, we've talked ad nauseum about our how much we're a fan of Dune, the 84
Yes.
Dune. And I mean, half the cast is in Twin Peaks,
Yes.
I mean, so when I came into Twin Peaks, I'm not thinking, oh, interesting TV show, police procedural. That's not where my brain is at all. My brain is, I'm in for a David Lynch ride. And that's what I get. So it did not make me afraid of that. Shortly after Twin Peaks, I discovered the 60s TV show The Prisoner.
Oh, yeah.
Was
that after Twin Peaks or before Twin Peaks?
Surely it was after.
Was it at the same time?
It was close.
Yeah.
I think it was after, though. Or it was right around the same time. I mean, so this idea of niche TV that makes you think and that doesn't always make sense and that maybe doesn't have what people would term a satisfactory ending, like that's my wheelhouse. Like that's the stuff I love. And it's because I saw these things when I was 12, 13 years old, that kind of thing. So even to today, if people are like, oh man, the ending, they really blew it. I'm like, oh, okay.
The Prisoner's an episode of itself.
Oh yes.
But I think Twin Peaks was a little bit of a warning that TV shows could do that. And certainly I experienced it later with Lost. I don't know if you watched Lost. But
I've got major issues with Lost.
Yeah, I mean, Lost really, it was appointment viewing, a lot of investment, and then, crashed and burned.
So this is obviously not the Lost episode, but we're
not going to do a Lost episode. No. Okay.
But it illustrates a point that you made earlier, which is at the end of the day, Lynch knows what he's doing. And
They were making it up as they went along with Lost.
and
Yes.
and they've admitted that.
Yes.
And that I lose a lot of respect when
Yep.
you're in that kind of a
What's
situation.
the smoke monster? I don't know what the
Yeah.
smoke monster is.
And that is not the way to craft a story.
Yep.
The fact that Lynch has proven himself and that he is he's a filmmaker and storyteller that I can trust, and that he's built that up for me, I give him a lot of latitude. So, like what you're talking about, Twin Peaks did not make me hesitant on other shows, but just the fact that J.J. Abrams, I don't know that guy. What is this? You know, and I gave Lost a fair shake, and for the first 2 seasons, loved it. And then it became apparent, not only apparent to viewers that they didn't know where they were going, but in interviews, they're like, "We don't know where we're going."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Come on, guys!" And so I think that just supports that statement that you made, that Lynch knows where he's going.
Yep. I will say that certainly Twin Peaks is better than Lost, and then you've got The Walking Dead, which is another one that did that to me. And I'm now very particular about what shows I will invest in, because I don't want to waste. I don't want to get into something and it to turn out to not be good, because it's a lot of time spent watching some of these shows. But what a big topic!
Yes,
I mean,
it
this
was.
is a monster of a topic. A lot of prep.
Yeah.
It's we love it. I have some complaints. But I love Twin Peaks, and I think David Lynch is very talented. And I hope to someday revisit The Return with not with leading with the disappointment of getting more Dale Cooper, and a true return to the town. I hope I can do that. I think I can. I've read that the other people who struggle with that. So because I think there's a lot there to really enjoy, and there's so much we didn't get to talk about.
I know.
Mr. C has a son. He was in prison. He
and
gets out of prison,
and is despicable. Like
despicable.
The
Yes.
most despicable character I've ever encountered anywhere. Yeah, I know.
But he still has the charisma of Dale Cooper, right? So he is totally despicable, but you can't take your eyes off him because he's so darn interesting.
Yeah.
You're not rooting for him at any point, but he's very, very interesting. And you want to know, like, what's his life like? What's his world like? I mean, at one point he has a quote: "I don't need things, I want things."
Yeah.
Like he's above needs. Does he need to eat? Does he need to breathe? Right? I mean, what's this like for him?
I know.
At one point he looks in the mirror and he sees Bob. He goes, "Good, you're still with me." Like he's in control of Bob, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Very interesting stuff, right? So
We did
lots. I mean, there's so much there.
so much. We didn't scratch the surface. Go watch the show.
Go watch the show. Tell us about it.
Yeah.
Once you've went and watched the show, listener, we want to know. Or maybe you have questions. Maybe you watched it. Obviously we're not the Twin Peaks answer people, but we could certainly give our thoughts if you have a question about what you saw on it. Chris, why don't you tell them where they could do that?
I'd be happy to, Dave. You can find us at the website, 2middleagedguys.com. That is 2, the numeral 2, middleagedguys.com. From there, you can connect with us through email. You can download our podcast. You can subscribe to the RSS feed. You can get us on Spotify, Apple Music, all the fun things where you get podcasts. You can also find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on the socials.
Twitter. What's that?
Yeah, it's X. But until they change the URL, I'm still calling it Twitter.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I went into our website to update that, and I got the link, and it still said twitter.com, and I was like, screw it. I'm keeping the old logo
Keeping the
there.
bird.
Yeah. So when Elon Musk gets to that point where the URL actually switches over, then I'll start calling it X.
Or maybe let's go back to calling it Twitter.
That would be better. Smart, honestly.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's where you can find us.
The
And
Elon Musk episode. Was that a little preview?
I hope not.
Yeah. I could talk about Mars for an hour, but I don't think that's probably where I would leave it.
No. But we hope you enjoyed this walk down Twin Peaks Lane. By far our longest episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you stuck through it. And drop us a line. Let us know what you think.
Absolutely. And you know what? We did not talk much about Judy.
No, we did not.
So I think we respected Philip Jeffries' wishes.
Somebody I highly respect told me that we're not going to talk about Judy.
We're not talking about Judy
So
today.
I listened.
Thanks, folks.
Take care.